Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Portrais, and I'm joined by Sean Koufax.
I'm fancy.
And our own fancy Bruce Leslie is not here yet again. He's over there in the old Ireland doing who knows what. My guess is probably harassing leprechauns or something. I don't know what they've got to do. Talking to goats. Let me tell you, he posted a thing up at facebook.com/Hero Movie Podcast of a picture of him and a goat, and I don't know that I've seen him more happy.
That man loves himself a goat.
Farmyard animals are just his forte. He enjoys it, and I just go, I've seen you with your family, and I haven't seen a smile that big on your face. What gives?
Which I get. I get it.
So we wish Bruce and all of his daughter there all the best of luck, and hope you're having a great time over there in Ireland. And we can't wait to have you back here next week, man. So yeah, week number 2 without Bruce, but I'll say this, Sean, we've done something a little bit special here. This show itself, we're not the biggest in the world. We really aren't. I see all these like top 50 movie podcast lists that people make up on the internet arbitrarily or with no real reason, and we're not on any of them. And that's a mistake, and I'll tell you why. Because
you shouldn't take that personally.
I don't. But here's the thing. I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for them because we hold so much sway that I don't think people even realize. Because as you know, if you listen to this program, last week, Sean and I covered the pilot episode of Swamp Thing on the DC Universe streaming app. And listen, I can't tell you for sure, not for absolute certain, but after our show dropped, DC canceled Swamp Thing. I'm not saying that we absolutely, our review canceled Swamp Thing, but I am saying that our review helped cancel Swamp Thing. And this is a great power that we have, and we do take it seriously. We do want to let you know that.
That's one for one. That's value for value.
I
think that when you look in the grand scheme of things,
mm-hmm.
We reviewed the Doctor Strange television show, and then they made a Doctor Strange movie.
See, they were like, you know what? These guys have a good idea. Let's take that and then make like a great version of it. I'm not saying that we weren't responsible for that as well.
I think, and I want to plant my flag in this right now. I've seen it a couple of times on Reddit. I think it's a great idea. I think that you've got to make John Krasinski your new Mr. Fantastic.
Absolutely. And just throw in Emily Blunt there as
please.
Sue. You're
throw
done.
in, sir. She's going to be the secret sauce in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, come on. She's just great in everything she's in, first of all.
I've never seen her be bad in something.
No.
Honestly, I haven't.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Now that I'm just kind of racking my brain, I'm just like, no, I'm coming up with blanks.
The first thing I ever saw her in, I saw her in The Devil Wears Prada first. That's the first thing I ever remember seeing her in and taking note of, that's a good actress.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's great in that. And then you look at everything she's been in since then. No, I haven't seen the sequel to Mary Poppins. Maybe she's
That's not her
garbage
fault.
fire.
That's not her fault, that movie. I mean, come on. You're living in the shadow of Julie Andrews, for heaven's sake. It's tough. It's tough.
Man.
So I can't blame her for that. I mean, the movie was fine, all in all itself, but I will say there's a cameo in that movie. Make you roll a tear. And she and that cameo ain't got nothing to do with the original movie or anything. But
really?
So, you'll go, oh, I've missed this person in my life. Why is this person not in my life? Roll a little.
You might as well tell me because I'm never going to see the movie.
Angela Lansbury is in it, and she's just delightful.
Oh, that's terrific.
It's so good. It's just like when she shows up.
Can you hear the smile in my voice right now?
It's so good. She just shows up and like she has like a little song, and it's just like, oh, that's so good. It's so
I've got to tell I have a terrific pseudo Angela Lansbury story.
Ooh.
Right? So real quick. This is not actually Angela Lansbury. It's just what I think of every time I think of her. So in the 90s, I was in a comedy group, and we had a fair amount of success. And in that group, there was a very weird guy who he kind of like he's on, like, maybe he's homeless, maybe he's not, maybe like voices are talking to him, maybe they're not. And for reasons I'll never understand, the people who ran the place kept him around. And so he would be on stage, and sometimes he would forget that there were people watching him. I mean, it was really that concerning, and I'm not saying mental health issues are something to laugh about, because that's not where this is headed. But one day, my buddy writes a script that is a parody of the Beauty and the Beast. And he gives the Mrs. Potts character to this guy who shall remain nameless. And he's in his like mid 40s, early 50s at the time. and my buddy hands him the script in the Mrs. Potts character. And I turned to him and I was like, Mrs. Potts is a really important character in this parody. Like, why are you giving it to that guy? Because he might not nail it for you. He's like, I just got a feeling. So we're at the table read of the script, and he starts reading it. Dude's got a spot on, dead as a doornail, spot on Angela Lansbury impression. I mean, to the point where like people are like, whoa, like looking up from their copy, staring at this guy. It was incredible. And I think about that every single time somebody brings up Angela Lansbury, is that this man, he has to go through so much more than everyone else does. But then you give him this one thing and he turns into an angel. It was amazing.
He's like, no, I got this.
It was incredible.
Stand
so I'm
back,
sorry
world.
I just sidetracked. Please continue.
No, but listen, I'm just saying that we have a lot of status over here at HMP, and we'd like to thank
John Krasinski,
all of you. John Krasinski's great.
Emily Blunt, everybody.
Do it.
Let's use our powers for good instead of for evil.
Exactly. And listen, I don't want to say nothing. This might be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but if you ask me, this is going to be the last Fox X-Men movie that's going to come out.
You're incorrect. There is one more.
Well, I guess that's true, but will that movie ever see the light of day?
You know that you're wrong.
Yeah. Fox X-Men movie though. I mean, outside of that, the New Mutants thing, which has been languishing.
That's what I mean.
But that's been they were talking about that coming out 2 years ago. Like the little girl from the Game of Thrones, man. She's gonna be 45 by the time that flick comes out.
You're not wrong.
When people are gonna be like, "Why does she look so young? Is that CGI de-aging her? What's going on?" And it's just like, no, that was shot back in 1998.
That looks really good.
That's amazing. Oh, the CGI is just top notch these days.
There is nothing like that Marvel de-aging process.
They did it for Tony Stark. They sure shooting can do it for her. Disney money, everybody. So we'll be doing all of that good stuff. But before we get going, though, do want to say a very hearty thank you to everyone that supports the show over at patreon.com/HMP. Get a little bit of the pre-show, post-show, and, hey, the Dinger Zone. And we talk about a whole lot of stuff from physical media and beyond. Oh, and today, if you get the pre-show and everything, on the pre-show, we talk a lot about Pixar, our favorite Pixar stuff. So you're missing out on these great conversations. You can do that by heading on over to patreon.com/HMP and joining up with the crew today. As we said, Dark Phoenix is our movie today. It was number 2 at the box office.
Really? What one?
Pets 2.
You're kidding me.
The first Pets movie was a pretty good film. I haven't seen the sequels. I can't speak to it. The first Pets movie was a lot of fun.
I found that movie to be adorable. I'm not going to lie to you.
It's good. And this one I'm sure is going to be probably pretty darn good itself. But yeah, it won over... I forget what their number was, but I know X-Men only debuted to 33 million.
The theater was packed that I saw it in.
Yeah, that's what's kind of funky, because the theater that I went to had a good amount of people in it. I work at a movie theater, and most of our screenings had a decent amount of people in it, but I don't know. I can't tell you. The numbers didn't translate or something.
I will tell you that there wasn't multiple viewings. There was that. Yeah. I mean, we were pretty packed in that movie theater. But it wasn't something where like I saw it at 3:00 and there was a 3:15 coming right behind it.
Yeah. It wasn't like Avengers where it's just like we're opening this on all of the screens.
Yeah.
They're just like, hey, look, there's 3 shows a day. You know, pick the one that you can make. kind of thing going on. But let's go ahead and do it. Let's. I have a trailer. Let me make sure I hit the right button here and don't do. Do you want to do the trailer first? Or you want to do Bruce's comic connection first? What do you want?
Let's do Bruce's. Let's do Bruce's comic book connection first.
All right. Let's put this on there.
It's time for Bruce's comic book connection.
And I thought I had that thing open, but apparently I don't. I will insert it here.
In my humble opinion, no story in all of X-Men history is as important or as impressive as the Dark Phoenix saga. Published in 1980, it was written by Chris Claremont, drawn by John Byrne, and really set the high point for what a comic book event could be. And this was a few years before things like Crisis on Infinite Earths and Secret Wars would really make comic book events a thing. But these 9 issues of classic Claremont greatness would have as much impact on why I like comics as any movie or television show from my youth. The story was probably about 5 or 6 years old before I got to read it, but thanks to reprints, it was easy enough for me to get my hands on. And anyone who thinks they might want to be an X-Men fan out there, they need to carve out a couple of hours and read it for themselves. It clearly is written for a slightly younger audience than today's comics, and at times Claremont had a way of over-explaining things. But it was fabulous and still makes me happy just thinking about it. The story starts on a mission to space. Jean Grey is exposed to the deadly radiation of a solar flare and briefly attains her ultimate potential as a telepath and telekinetic. Jean becomes a being of pure thought and then reforms herself upon return to Earth with the new costume, identity, and power of Phoenix. Some people forget that Jean Grey was originally called Marvel Girl, but no one ever forgets her as Phoenix. Jean relied on her own self-control and restraint to harness the power of the Phoenix Force, and not to spoil things too soon, but it doesn't exactly go well. She becomes a target for Mastermind, a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants who's trying to make his way into the Hellfire Club. He takes on an assumed identity as a suave dude and proceeds to seduce Jean Grey. I tell you, guys only have one thing on their minds, and that is world domination. But with the help of a mind device created by Emma Frost, Mastermind begins projecting illusions into Jean Grey's mind. These illusions cause her to believe that she's reliving the memories of an ancestor, someone named Lady Grey, who in Mastermind's illusions was the Hellfire Club's Black Queen and the lover of one of Wyngarde's ancestors. Phoenix eventually accepts the Black Queen as her actual identity and begins to lose her self-imposed restraints on the Phoenix Force. She helps the Hellfire Club capture the X-Men, and Jean's true love, Cyclops, faces Mastermind in a psychic duel. You know, there was a time in my youth that I hoped to get challenged to a duel, just so I could pick our minds as the weapons, but I mostly just got wedgied. Now back to the story. Mastermind kills Cyclops' psychic image, and it breaks his hold over Jean's psyche and shatters the final barriers on her power. Experiencing this power in its totality overwhelms Jean, and she renames herself Dark Phoenix. Enraged at Mastermind, she uses a telepathic illusion to drive him insane, and then to break her ties with her less powerful identity of Jean Grey, she strikes down the X-Men and departs for a distant galaxy. However, her powers prove to be a little bit more limited than she thought. The intergalactic trip leaves her pretty hungry. It leaves her drained of energy. And to recharge, she devours the energy of an entire star. There's this star nearby. She soaks in its power. That causes a supernova, which kills the entire population of a civilized planet that was orbiting the star. The Shi'ar, the Kree, the Skrull empires, they all put aside their differences when they determine that the Phoenix is a bigger threat than even Galactus, and they unify with the goal of destroying the Phoenix. Dark Phoenix returns to Earth. She goes to her old family home, Jean Grey's family home, and she finds herself conflicted between her normal feelings for her loved ones and her new destructive impulses as the Dark Phoenix. Professor X arrives, and through a vicious psychic duel, another one of those psychic duels that I love so much, he creates a new set of circuit breakers, I think are what he calls them, psychic circuit breakers, which reduce Jean Grey to her original Marvel Girl powers. This allows Jean's normal personality to reassert control. When the aliens come for Jean, the X-Men challenge the Shi'ar to a duel on the blue side of the moon, and when all the X-Men are defeated and it looks like Cyclops might even be dead, Jean flips those circuit breakers, and the Phoenix emerges once again. It turns out the aliens were prepared for this, and they initiate Plan Omega, which is a plan to destroy the whole solar system just to get rid of Phoenix. But the X-Men aren't really dead, and Professor X orders them to subdue Jean in order to save the solar system. Jean runs around until she finds a Kree weapon that she uses to disintegrate herself after a sad goodbye to her good buddies. The story ends with Uatu the Watcher commenting that Jean Grey could have lived to become a god, but it was more important to her that she die a human. Now, the whole story got Jim Shooter, who was Marvel's editor-in-chief at the time, in a tizzy, because apparently the guy who had Hank Pym perpetrate domestic violence against Janet Van Dyne thought having Jean Grey destroying a whole solar system was a step over the line. But despite Shooter being the boss on paper, it's pretty hard to hold back a force like Chris Claremont and John Byrne in 1980. But Shooter did get his way with how the story ended. He basically said, if Jean kills a whole planet, she has to die in the end, and die she did. Well, she comic book died. So you know how that goes. A lot of debate happened in the following years about whether Jean Grey and the Phoenix were one entity or two. Was Jean's body really inhabited by the Phoenix Force, or did Jean actually die when that solar flare hit her and the Phoenix Force just assumed her form? It's not unlike some of the changes Alan Moore brought to Swamp Thing at around the same time, but I won't say anything more about that because Swamp Thing was last week, and by the way, go Blue Devil, arrgh! Now, in 1982, in a crossover story in which the Teen Titans met the X-Men, Darkseid resurrected the Dark Phoenix. In the end, Dark Phoenix is betrayed by Darkseid and sacrifices her life yet again to stop Darkseid. This starts a pretty solid rule that anytime Phoenix shows up, she has to die more or less by her own hand. On account of my international man of mystery journeys, I haven't yet seen the Dark Phoenix 2019 movie, but I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that Jean sacrifices herself at the end while a bunch of mutant tears roll down mutant cheeks. So tell me, guys, am I right?
You're as right as you are wrong, Bruce. We'll talk about that. But it's time for another fake trailer, everybody. And this week it falls to me. So let's go ahead and listen to the trailer for Dark Phoenix.
In my humble opinion,
Gosh darn it.
no story in all of X-Men history.
In my humble opinion.
Oh, my Lord.
No story in all of X-
No, Bruce. Oh, my Lord. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, let's play that twice.
Let's play. Worst mistake ever. All right. Now let's listen to the trailer for Dark Phoenix.
This summer, you cried when the voice of Iago wasn't Gilbert Godfrey. You got pissed off that the Game of Thrones landed in a heap. Now, get ready to send the X-Men franchise off with all of your favorite characters. Except the one you really care about. Get ready for 2 hours of fantastic acting from two of Hollywood's greatest A-list stars, along with the Muppet Babies of the comic book movie universe. I'm sorry, that was way too rough on the Muppet Babies. Get ready for the type of sleepwalking performance only capable by an Oscar winner who needs to fill a contractual obligation as long as it doesn't require sitting in a makeup chair for 5 hours each day. Experience the thrill of thousands of rounds of spent ammunition without a single person dying. Discover scenes involving enemies so vaguely drawn you'll know nothing about them and you won't even care. From writer-director Simon Kinberg, the mastermind behind Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
That's good.
X-Men: The Last Stand.
That's bad.
Jumper.
Ooh, that's bad.
Sherlock Holmes.
That's good.
X-Men: Days of Future Past.
That's good.
Fantastic Four.
Ooh, that's bad.
And X-Men Apocalypse.
That's bad.
Can I go now?
So, yeah, we're at like a 50% chance, huh? X-Men. Yeah, we're still a thing. Kinda. Dark Phoenix. Rated PG-13.
All right, everybody. That
was great, Adam. Good job by you.
Thank you. Here's the IMDb plotline. Jean Grey begins to develop incredible powers that corrupt and turn her into Dark Phoenix. Now the X-Men will have to decide if the life of a team member is worth more than all the people living in the world. And I can answer that for you right away. The answer is always going to be yes to that. If one person is what is in between you and the end of humanity, I'm sure you could love that person, but you're going to have to kill them. That's how it works.
So have you read the source material on this? Have you ever read Dark Phoenix?
I mean, it's been forever and a day. I mean, I was a kid when I read it, and I was just like, meh. And it's like you said, it's a Claremont book, so you're going to take 8 weeks to read it.
Right, because it's all dialogue.
It's just all dialogue packed to the gills, and you're just like, all right, the grass was green. We got it. Can we go?
Well, see, here's the thing, right? So I was too young when it first came out, of course, so I didn't read it at the time. And I read it later, probably in the 90s when X-Men were everything.
Oh, yeah.
Know? The comic book X-Men in the 90s were just an unstoppable juggernaut, and everyone had their favorite X-Men if you read comic books and blah, blah, blah. And so I read all of the things going backwards, like Asgardian Wars I read, and one of the things I read was Dark Phoenix. Here is what I think. I think that what X-Men 3 gets wrong, what Dark Phoenix now, this movie gets wrong, is that Jean Grey is the heart and soul of the X-Men when all of this starts going down. It's not Professor X, it's not Scott, it's not Wolverine, it's not Beast, it's not Mystique. It is literally Jean Grey is the heart and soul of that team. Yeah. And they did nothing to set that up in previous movies. So if you're going to if you're walking into the Dark Phoenix saga, which every interview I have heard with the creators of the X-Men movies tell you, oh, this is where we were headed. You know, after X-Men First Class comes out, they kind of had a roadmap of we want to go here, then here, then here, yeah. Right? And so they do X-Men First Class, and it is surprisingly great. You know, I coming off of X3 and then Wolverine Origins, no one had any hope for that franchise. So when they come out with that movie, everyone's kind of like, oh, wow, like this is surprisingly great. This is really fun and good. And, you know, these actors are terrific as these characters. Yeah. And that remained the same. You know, I think that you could do worse than the 3 people that you have playing Magneto and Professor X and Mystique. I mean, they're really, really terrific in those first couple movies. And so then the next thing they were going to do, originally the plan was they were going to do Apocalypse, then they were going to do Days of Future Past, and then they were going to do Dark Phoenix, which means that they knew right after First Class was a success, they knew what their timeline was going to be. Yeah. And they did almost nothing to make Jean Grey ingratiated into our hearts as a character in their movie universe, in the X-Men movie universe. And so now that you're at Dark Phoenix, and you know, Jean Grey's fine. She's fine. She's a character that you're not, you know, like Famke Janssen was great as her, and now Sophie Turner is just fine as her. I don't think she's bad. You just don't care. You know, you don't care. This one character is turning evil. Well, we saw that already. We've seen that a bunch of times before. We've seen it with this character like 10 movies ago, and it's still the same story. And it's the same story because you didn't build this character up enough for us to care about her. And so to me, that is the biggest problem with both of our Dark Phoenix movies that we got. And let's be clear about this. We're never going to get another one. Like there, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, let's say Marvel's doing wonders where we're 30 years into superhero movies and we're still making superhero movies. Yeah. That they make another Dark Phoenix, but I cannot foresee that happening.
I don't know. I was shocked that this one came out,
Yeah.
to be quite honest. I was just like, oh, we're going back to that already. Because here's the thing, like you said, especially in the 90s and stuff, Dark Phoenix was hit home a lot. I mean, it was one of those, like, it was a very popular trade paperback selling and everything. There was the X-Men cartoon where there was a whole Phoenix Saga deal in that.
Which they did a lot better than these movies have.
Yeah, everyone agrees with that. It's true. But we came in, and you're right. I think that's one of the biggest problems with this is that we haven't really stayed a lot with these characters, save for, like you said, Mystique, Professor X, and Magneto. That's it. The rest of these people, we don't really care. Now, some of them were, featured slightly in other movies, and then, but again, I don't know who Scott is. I don't know.
Right.
We haven't spent any time with him. I don't know who Jean is. We haven't spent any time with her. Sure, in the last movie, she had a couple of, Phoenix sneezes for some reason. I don't know what that was about. But then, because that whole thing up against Apocalypse at the end of that, she's basically got like a precursor, if you will, to the Phoenix stuff. And then what? We don't pay any attention to that. And then when this new thing happens, all of a sudden, then it's a thing? I don't know. It seems like they didn't think this out too well. And again, that wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Why would you not think these things out any further, or at least, go like, hey, you remember the time when we, messed with Apocalypse and you turned into a big fiery thing? Hey, let's talk about that for half a second. No, this is the first thing that we're going to find out when they're flying in a jet and all this crap goes down.
Well, it's funny because the only thing that they bring up, and keep in mind, there are 12 X-Men movies now.
Yeah.
There are 12. And the only thing that they reference at all is First Class, and it comes when Mystique turns to Beast and says, "We're all that's left of the First Class." And it's a weird moment in this movie. It's a cool moment actually, but it is a weird moment because it actually is taking a moment to go, "Hey, we have this huge history within these movies. We have them." And one of the things that I find really strange about Dark Phoenix is that it, even in its own, and I know that the X-Men timeline is just completely crazy at this point, but even within even giving it all of the rope that it needs to do what it needs to do, it doesn't work. Like you've done this once before with these characters in universe, and the time is wrong for this being done now, because there's characters who hadn't met each other in X-Men 3, like when you think about things like that. And I'm fine with that. Ultimately, just make a good movie. But they don't do that. And I don't know if it's because Simon Kinberg is not a director. He's a writer. Mm-hmm. And he probably shouldn't have been given this movie right away. You need to do the ramp up. But I think that a lot of people thought, oh, well, this worked with Matthew Vaughn, so this will probably work with Simon Kinberg also. And it doesn't, because Matthew Vaughn is great. He's had a misstep here or there with one or two of his movies, but for the most part, his movies are great, and that includes X-Men First Class. And so I think that they were trying to do the same thing that happened with Matthew Vaughn, and it just doesn't work because nothing happens. Nothing happens in this movie.
No, it doesn't. Nothing happens. As I said in the trailer, we get a million bullet shot, and really no one dies. No one's even nicked. No one's nicked by a bullet in this thing, and it's close quarter gun work too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of unbelievable, and in all of the action scenes, for the most part, don't really have much to them. There's nothing that makes you go like, oh, wow, they really, they did something there. It's just generic fight after generic fight that ultimately doesn't lead a lot of anywhere.
So let's look at the wallpaper here, right? Let's break this down, because I've already mentioned it. There's 12 X-Men movies, because you got the first 3 X-Men movies. You got the 3 Wolverine movies that include Logan. You've got the 4 new First Class X-Men movies that start with X-Men First Class, and then you have the 2 Deadpool movies.
Mm-hmm.
That's 12 movies all in all.
Which, by the way, just real quick for new listeners and stuff, we'll be spoiling everything from here on out. So we sometimes forget new listeners and stuff, and we do spoilers for everything. So do keep that in mind from this time on out. But I don't know what we'd be spoiling out, save for like 2 or 3 things.
Yeah. I mean, there's one big spoiler in this movie, and that's about it.
Yeah, everything else is like, all right.
Yeah, and of those 12 movies, of these 12 X-Men movies, because I counted them, it is literally half and half. Half of them are good, half of them are not good. It is 50-50 whether or not they're going to nail it or not. Because this is the way I break it down. X2 is good. Mm-hmm. X-Men First Class is good. Logan is good. Days of Future Past and Deadpool 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. And Deadpool 2 I'm giving a little leeway for because it's more of the same of the first Deadpool movie.
It's basically it's basically the same film, so you really can't nick too many points. Right.
And so that's 6 movies. Of 12 movies made, 6 movies. Do you agree with that list?
I think the first X-Men might just sneak in under the wire.
Have you seen that recently, though? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. It's just, again, we talk about this on the show a lot. I'm very much of the origin stuff, but like, yeah, I mean, gosh.
It's hard to watch, man. There's moments in that
dollars
movie
to donuts.
Like, my God, this is brutal.
I'm gonna take it off. Let's go with 2. Yeah, I'll cop to that. I'll agree. Yeah.
You know, you're forgetting like him cutting the one spike in the Statue of Liberty and flipping around. That's just awful.
Yeah. All the Halle Berry stuff. Which, by the way, I'll say this real quick. We got a good road or storm rather.
I like the new Aurora.
I like her a whole bunch. She's got the right accent for it and everything. She's got the right look. We don't give her anything to do, but she looks and sounds good.
Well, that's the thing with these movies, right? Ever since First Class, they really up the ante with the actors. Let's put aside the fact that Jennifer Lawrence and Michael Fassbender at this point are literally just walking through this movie so that they could be done with the movie, especially Jennifer Lawrence. But Fassbender, he's basically just charming it up in this one.
Fassbender barely puts on a pair of pants in this film. Like
he really doesn't want to be there. Really.
He's so walking through it. Like he's like, look, man, I ain't gonna put on the full outfit. I'll put on the head thing at some point, but that's all I'm doing. And I don't even want to wear that for more than a day.
It seems to me like they have forgotten the thing that made First Class great, which is that, hey, we have these actors who want to do this, who want to make a great movie. And so that's why you put in McAvoy and Fassbender and Lawrence in the first place, is because they were really good in those roles. Yeah. And now 2 of those 3 people don't want to be there anymore. And so why are you focusing on these 2 characters who don't want to be there? Right?
I do want to say this.
Don't want to be there.
I want to say this, though, because you made a very good point right there. Those 2 actors don't want to be there. It does feel like McAvoy is giving his everything.
He is. He absolutely is. And so is Nicholas Hoult.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, Nicholas Holt's great too. Nicholas Hoult is both of those guys are in this movie, and they are in this movie, if you know what I mean. And I think that you do.
Yeah. Oh, I do. I do get it. And so you have these other characters, right? I mean, you like Beast is chomping at the scenery. McAvoy's doing a great job. Where is Evan Peters? Why aren't you focusing on Quicksilver?
Everyone loved Quicksilver in his 2 big outings and everything, and everybody was just like, oh wow, check this out. This is some good stuff here. And they were like, yeah, you know all that stuff you like? Nah, we ain't playing that.
I don't understand it. He has that one cool shot where he's going up the debris to get to Phoenix. But for the most part, that character is a non-entity. And Evan Peters is a 1,000-watt bulb. Use him to his advantage. You have Aurora Monroe. It's the new Storm. She is terrific in this. Like, why aren't you using her more?
Yeah, she seems to be doing something. And and it feels like she cares. It feels like they care. And not for nothing. And I don't want to say like Fassbender and Lawrence don't really care per se, but they're not giving it their all.
No,
it's
they're
a
not.
it's a very sleepwalky performance.
I mean, think about how great Fassbender is in Days of Future Past.
Oh gosh, he's so good.
He is so amazing in that, and he's just such a massive movie star in that movie. And when you think of think of McAvoy and Fassbender and Hugh Jackman walking down that hallway, and you're like, holy crap, like these guys are great.
Just all-star team.
And they're not even using powers. They're literally just walking down a hallway, and you're like, oh, they're about to mess some stuff up hardcore.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see it. They don't have a single moment like that in this movie where you're just like, now that is a B.A. Baracus moment right there.
Yeah.
Like where you're just seeing people being tough and being great at their job. Like that never exists in this movie. And it's a bummer because you have actors and you have characters who are legitimately awesome. We've seen them be great before. And they're not even allowed to be great in this movie because everyone's so busy cowering because Jean. And let's get to Jean, because
Yeah.
Sophie Turner for the first time since Game of Thrones, I was actually surprised at the performance because I expected her to be the weak link in this thing, and she's not. She's not
fine.
given a ton to do,
Yeah, that's the problem.
but that's not on her. That's on Kinberg. And so, when you see her go from, like kid who's a little nervous to use her power to where she is by the middle of this movie, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, she's doing pretty good, I guess. But and there's the weird stuff where the dad doesn't want her. Like,
What a weird subplot
what?
that just absolutely 1,000% does not need to be there and feels like Simon Kinberg going through something.
Yeah,
Doesn't it?
It does.
Feels like Simon Kinberg's just like, hey, well, how's your relationship with Pops there, Kinberg? I'm curious because my guess is it ain't stellar.
And they do the trick that X-Men movies do when they do it well. You're like, oh man, that was great. Where they show you a mutant that you haven't seen previously in a movie, and they do it with Dazzler in this movie, where when you see her, you're like, oh man, that's awesome.
I can't believe it. You're like, we got Dazzler in this flick? What?
I can't believe they put Dazzler in this. Like, it was great.
Yeah.
And perfect for the moment, and exactly right. But then you never see her again. What? Why would you do that to us?
Why do I want to pay off stuff? Shut up. That's why.
So instead, we're headed to
Chekhov's Dazzler.
Yes, exactly. But so here is my biggest thing with this movie. So when Jean shows up to see Magneto to ask him, how did you get over killing people? Did you understand where they were? Did you know where Jean was going to go talk to him?
Not really, no.
The setting for that, you don't understand that? I didn't know it until I read some stuff on it later.
No clue.
Genosha.
That would have been a guess, but they make little to no reference at all.
At all. There is no reference to that being Genosha. There's nothingness.
You'd have gotten a smile out of me if you would have said Genosha. I'd have been like, oh, all right, good job. Throwing back some stuff that we know.
Show that they're on an island in the middle of nowhere. Whatever you have to do, that's a quick establishing shot. You could have used existing footage even.
They went to the woods. That's all we know. It's a wooded area.
That's one of the things that's one of the problems of this movie. It's what makes this movie so problematic for me. Is that, like, I understand that there's a whole lot of history to all this stuff, and I understand that you don't want to get into that, but at least give us a little nod that it's Genosha. Show us an establishing shot of an island in the middle of the ocean, nowhere, or even a thing on the bottom, Genosha Sanctuary for Mutants, whatever.
I'm going to do you one even better. Like, that's honestly, I mean, as much as I agree with it, somebody could look at that and just go like, that's that's for the nerds. And true, absolutely, granted. But let me ask you this: Jessica Chastain is our villain here. Who is she? Who is this person? Who is like, because it's not her per se. It's this woman who was at a party and then gets more or less, invasion of the body snatcher all up and everything. Who's this alien race? Who are these people? I don't know. Like, these are the least defined villains I think I've ever seen in a superhero film.
Well, her character's name is Vuk, V-U-K.
Yeah.
And if you go to YouTube and you see any reviews on this movie, don't think that doesn't get hit hard. And she is the leader of a surviving race where Jean, or the Phoenix Force, has destroyed her planet instead of the sun, like in Bruce's comic book connection. Phoenix destroys the planet, not the sun that the planet is revolving around.
Yeah.
And so they are literally there just to destroy the Phoenix Force.
But it's nothing we really know,
and
right?
On top of that, too, and then they add on later, and then we're going to take over Earth. That happens in the third act of this movie.
They decide late.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I got another idea.
Hey, that's not working out. You know what we could do?
for a movie where it is 90% people talking to each other, there is so much dialogue in this movie. There is so little that is explained. It is a lot of people talking about what they should or shouldn't do.
And for the record, everybody,
that is mostly what this movie is.
This isn't like, show don't tell. They're not showing, they're not telling. They're doing neither. We're just supposed to.
There's a lot of
figure
arguments happening around a major event and whether or not they should do that or not. That's most of the movie, and it's a bummer because McAvoy. Oh, and that's another. That was a very cool scene. That scene where McAvoy, she forces him to walk.
I love that. I thought that was very cool.
That is a great scene. The problem is there isn't nearly enough of that in this movie. There's, there isn't enough back end of it of showing Jean being the heart of the X-Men. There's also not enough of showing Jean being horrible.
Just ruthless. You don't feel like she's that sort of threat, especially not to them and not to the, the world writ large.
Right.
You
that
just
should
don't
be
care.
Step one of her being horrible is her moving Charles like a marionette puppet. And there isn't nearly
And it
enough
doesn't get
of
darker from there. No.
And I'm going to hit the big spoiler in this movie right now.
Okie doke.
And that is that
the spoiler everyone I'm sure laughs at when they go, oh, that makes sense.
Jean kills Mystique in this movie accidentally, kind of, sort of accidentally.
But
like it's
pretty close to the beginning, so Jennifer Lawrence has to be there for maybe a week tops, and then they just send her off, because I promise you that was... And I will say this, I was shocked. I was shocked at how much she was in the makeup, but then I was not shocked. I was like, oh, because they're killing her early. I was like, so she's just like, look, I'll do it for a couple more times. I guarantee you she was on set maybe 5 days. She had maybe 3 days of makeup. That's a guess, but I think it's a pretty good guess.
Yeah, I think you're right too. And when it goes down, there's an argument between the X-Men of she did it on purpose, she didn't do it on purpose. And that is what this movie is. It is people arguing with each other over and over and over again on what should happen with Jean. That is not the movie that we were promised. We were promised the actual the good telling of the Dark Phoenix saga.
It's like it's gonna be so dark and moody and and you're like, no, not really. It's just kind of.
And there seems to be a glazing over of X-Men 3 that now in retrospect people are like, oh, actually it's not as bad as you think. This is the worst X-Men movie ever made. That is not true. X-Men 3, it's between X-Men 3 and Wolverine Origins, which is the worst movie, X-Men movie ever made. Wolverine Origins almost killed a franchise. Like, let's keep all of these things in mind.
We were almost ready to write off that altogether. Go, do we really need any more of this? Because if it's going to be like this, I don't know that I want it.
I mean, I mentioned it in the beginning of this episode. Nobody wanted X-Men First Class. Like nobody was like, "Oh, awesome, they're making a new X-Men."
It sounded like a bad idea.
It did. But, and they're going backwards. Have they learned nothing? It was one of those things.
Yeah.
And it just turned out that it was pretty great. And then Days of Future Past was great, even better than X-Men First Class. But Wolverine Origins almost killed the franchise. And it was already on its it was already kind of groggy on its feet because of X3.
Yeah. Of which Simon Kinberg also wrote, by the
Yes,
by,
he
for
did.
everyone, just as a reminder.
Yes,
He's
he did.
responsible
And-
for both of these, and you whiffed on both, buddy.
And I know that everybody looks at Brett Ratner now because of, all of his personal stuff and that he's a terrible person and a terrible director. And both of those things are true. But he's not the only problem with X3. There's a lot of problems with that movie.
I don't lay the faults of that movie on him as much because he was kind of a direct to hire at the last minute because Matthew Vaughn dropped out. Right. And he was just like, I've got some personal stuff. I'm out of here. And frankly, I was astounded they let him back for First Class because, I'd have been like, no, dude, you left us high and dry. And that movie, was terrible. So why on earth would we have you back? But they were smart and said, okay, we know that this guy is talented and stuff. So I don't really put, as bad as X-Men 3 is, I don't put that on Ratner as much as I do Kinberg and the studio itself, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the same mistake. They make the exact same mistake in this that they did in 3, which is, oh, hey, these 3, we have these characters and these characters are the ones that everybody wants to see. And so let's just have them do more of the same instead of, oh, hey, there are these other very interesting characters. This Angel character is a very interesting character. Let's just give him a little side story. Like that's literally what it is. Yeah. Until his side story becomes the major through line because they're also coming up with the antidote for being a mutant at the same time that Dark Phoenix is happening, which is ridiculous. But let's look at it like this, right? So Jean goes to Genosha to talk to Magneto. I would say to you that the story of Genosha in the first place is far more interesting than a retelling of Dark Phoenix.
We don't know who these people are. We don't know why they're all there. We know that they're in league with Eric somehow, but that's
Right.
about it. We don't really know a whole heck of a lot. One could assume and does assume that these folks are probably mutants or something, but that's few and far between. We just don't really know.
But the Genosha story is by itself interesting. That they Magneto understands that no matter where they go, they're going to be persecuted because they're mutants and people are afraid of them. So he raises an island out of the ocean and creates Genosha.
Right.
And so the only thing, and he's not even a bad guy anymore at this point. He's basically, what's happening is that other countries are like, hey, you can't do that. We're coming after you. And he goes, if you come anywhere near this island, you're going to be taken down. And that is a far more interesting story than retelling Dark Phoenix the same way twice.
Right, and Magneto has really always been such a great linchpin within the stories themselves. I mean, from comics on, that it feels like again, let's ride with the horses that brought us. You know what I mean? Right. A Fassbender McAvoy final chapter here would be far more interesting than a Phoenix saga.
Yeah.
It's like
yes,
let's get with these characters and find out what makes these characters so cool that when you rewind back to that first X-Men and you see them, the two of them meeting in a hall and everything, you feel there's a sense of history with these two characters. Show us what that history is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let us see something that that we're not going to get anywhere else. We've got a Phoenix story. It stinks. Let's do something else.
You know what my secret wish was for this movie was that at the end of this movie, what I was hoping was going to happen is that, because it was going to be the same exact thing where Jean has to sacrifice herself, blah, 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 blah. But what I was hoping for is that the Phoenix Force completely rips the time continuum and completely breaks open reality,
Oh, what it would be. Oh, gosh, it would be something.
which opens the door for them going to Marvel.
And and there's enough stuff out there that it feels like that's where we're kind of going with the new Spider-Man trailers out and everything. You know, they kind of bring in the idea of multiverse sort of stuff. It's an easy crossover, man, and you could do it. And this just seems so super boneheaded to me. It's just like if you had any brains over there, it may be because the finalization with Disney just hadn't happened or anything yet, but you could have done something. You could have done something to have that and continue on with your stuff. But I don't even think that they even have that sort of, belief behind this. I think they see it and just go like, what's the point? We'll give them what we imagine to be 3 years worth of waiting period and then get them something that they're actually going to enjoy.
But they also had to do extensive reshoots for this. You know, when the people at X-Men, when the people at Fox saw what the third act of Avengers was in game, they were like, oh no, we have to reshoot the third act of our movie. And so they did. They went back and reshot that entire train sequence. All of the train stuff is all reshoots.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because it kind of feels that way. There's a lot of this movie that feels like kind of sort of reshooty-esque in as much as like, this is supposed to be a giant film, but it feels so small. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's supposed to feel epic, but it in no way feels epic at all. I'm never going like, ooh, Jean could destroy the whole planet. I feel like she's a threat to the people that are in the room.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I don't feel like, oh no, the city itself is going to, that never happens. Never that feeling.
And this is it's now time to bring this up.
All right.
Umbrella Academy did this better.
Yeah, and that's saying something because I didn't really like it.
I know that you didn't.
All that
I
much.
know you can't stand that show.
And it did better. They did a better job there than what we're doing here. It's wildly confusing, this movie. And again, there's so much that go, and it's over 2 hours. But what do they really do? Nothing. They just don't do anything. And like ultimately, to me that's the saddest part is that you finish up and you're like, all right, well,
well,
there we go.
Well, I guess that's it for the X-Men universe at Fox.
So no more of these. That's probably a good thing. I feel like this. I feel like this one as like I felt at the end of Saw 7, where I was just like, all right, it's a good thing that there's not going to be any more of these. I'm like, I think we've run our course. I'm good. If I don't see another one of these, I think we're fine.
Yeah, there's definitely that feeling with this one where maybe it's time you guys hang this one up.
No one's no one's crying. No one's leaving the theater just going, oh my God. It's not an end game where everybody was just like, wow, they really nailed that. They nailed the landing on that. Unbelievable. How could you do it? And look, we were even one saying it's just like, you're not going to see anything of this magnitude ever again. How could anybody stick it harder than this? And I don't think they will. They certainly don't here.
Well, we got to give them credit, though. We do have to give the X-Men folk credit. Simon Kinberg included in this, is they did the thing that I can only think of 2 franchises ever doing. And that's this one and Fast and the Furious, where it looked like everything was over and they came back swinging, and it just got bigger and better and badder, and to the point where, okay, that's enough, guys. But they did come back, and those 2 franchises are the ones that I can think of just off the top of my head where you're like, oh wow, and maybe time wise this doesn't link up, but they came out roughly the same time too.
Roundabout. I mean, the first, I think they're both came out in 99.
Man,
if memory
that
serves.
seemes like a million years ago.
Right around that era. But yeah, well, and here's the thing: by the 5th movie for Fast and the Furious, they were just like, they finally figured out what they were supposed to be. They go, oh, we're supposed to, we shouldn't be taking this so seriously. We should be having a lot more fun with this. And when they started having fun, the movies got a lot better.
Right.
And so, but there's no fun in this, like on any level. There's no fun. There's no terror. There's not anything. And I think that's ultimately where the problem with this thing lies, is that I'll get to this a little bit more in the review or in the grading process and everything. But this movie is almost one of those. It's not absolutely awful, but it's mediocre. Its mediocrity makes it worse. That's almost worse to be this mediocre and not instead of just being bad. I'd rather you just be flat out awful bad, because sometimes those are fun, you know? This is just like, it's so mediocre that it's just like, I don't care.
Boy, that sure sounds familiar. Where have I heard that before? Oh, that's right. I say it all the time.
It's true. It's true.
So I just looked it up. Fast and the Furious, the first one came out in 2001.
Oh, really?
The first X-Men came out in 2000.
Okay, so that's close.
19 years old with this franchise. They've really done something special here with that.
Yeah.
You know, it's made so much money.
Credit where credit's due, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you know, good job by them. This is not the way that they should have gone out, but what are you going to do?
Now, I'll tell you what we are going to do. We are going to open up the old HMP mailbag. Dang it, I stopped. My life stinks today. I don't know what's going on. Hold on.
Fails here.
I can't win. All right. We do have, if we'd like to let everyone know that we do have an email address, heromoviepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love it if you send us an email. And we got a voicemail, actually. You can do this. So if you think that I read terribly, which you're not wrong, but if you want to leave us a voicemail, you can do that as well. Just send a little MP3 like our good friend Krista did. Here is Chris's voicemail.
Gentlemen, this is Krista, whom Sean nicknamed Little Impaler. I want to congratulate Sean on getting his fondest wish. Swamp Thing is canceled already. I look forward to meeting you at DragonCon, Mr. Koufax, since I'm sure you're not as snobby as previous Sean and will show up this year. I hope I have almost as fun hanging out with you as I did with Adam 2 years ago. Right, Adam? Also, Adam, you are cursed, but I am thankful that you were the tiebreaker in my getting this microphone. You and Jamie, my podcast co-host on Undeclared the Punisher, #obligatory plug, agreed yet again. Now for catching up on some things I've been meaning to say about your very fun shows that I enjoy very much as a patron. Avengers, Endgame, quick trivia, some interesting nicknames for Russians. Alexander, Sasha, Anna, Anya, Mikhail, Misha, Maria, Masha, Natalia, Natasha. Captain America, Winter Soldier. Thank you for covering this movie for Adam's birthday. Shame on you, Mr. Koufax, for using toxic masculinity to mock Adam for enjoying his birthday and calling him a girl for doing so.
No, he was right.
But I'm glad you and I have the common ground of realizing that Steve Rogers is the best character in the MCU, and thank you to Adam for retweeting my thank you to Chris Evans in tribute to my grandfather. Now to go back in time, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Adam, you made me laugh so hard saying that diversity just needs to be organic when talking about this film. Now, Sean doesn't know me, but Bruce does and wouldn't be surprised by the next 45 seconds. How much hate did the creators or even just the existence of Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen get prior to being in this movie? Whether it got labeled PC garbage or SJW nonsense, I recall a lot of hate for these characters, quote, unquote, ruining Spider-Man because Spider-Man is white and a dude, unless he's Spider-Ham, which didn't get nearly as much hate because, hey, that's fine. Kind of like having a tree and a raccoon in a movie before we get a woman-centric or a non-white-centric movie in the MCU, both of which still got a lot of hate for daring not to have a white male lead. You don't have organic diversity in these films unless someone makes the characters in the first place, and those people and their characters face a lot of hate when they do exist. So, you want organic diversity? Let it happen without requiring the stories about people who don't look like you to be twice as good to be liked half as much. And Sean, do me a solid and cut off Adam before he says he's not like that, because we both know he is. Now on to lighter fare. On Doom Patrol, which I have yet to see, and shame on me. But seriously, someone give me their password. 1. Alan Tudyk is not attractive. I did see the first season of Con Man, of which I was a backer, and it was not good after the first episode. Except for Henry Rollins making fun of Adam Baldwin, and of course Felicia Day. 2. Or should I say B, Adam? Adam, we've talked about Matt Bomer multiple times on the Film Find, #obligatory plug, including the fact that he's gay. because I mentioned how nice and respectful he was of all women, including the lunch ladies when we were together in college, because men can be nice to women without wanting fun times. Matt Bomer for any role in any film that needs a white dude, and I hope old Sean gets the chance to work with him someday, because he really is that nice. Shazam episodes 1 and 2. Sean, you jerk. I have no kids, and although that wasn't the plan, there are a couple of bonuses. One of them was not knowing the melody of Baby Shark. You big jerk face. Now I know Bruce is across the pond, but I hope you guys give him the heads up. Bruce, time to tell me why you haven't called your favorite patent attorney on your sock lock idea. I did a quick search, and there are at least 5 applications out there for such a device, but I'm sure yours is better. What are ya, chipmunk? Make sure to tell Ed Brubaker I said hey when you have him over for dinner with the family again. Now that I've moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, does anyone have any ideas of what the heck I can do around here besides re-listening to episodes of HMP? Krista, aka the Lil Impaler, sticking it to the men of HMP. Thanks, guys. P.S. About Dark Phoenix. I think it was the worst idea that Fox ever had to talk about Stan Lee and Marvel so much before the movie so that we had the idea in our brains that this might be a 10th as good as an MCU movie. Because, it was not. I mean, there wasn't even any Gambit.
Don't nobody want a Gambit.
So I'm going to bring something up. I'm sure she's very busy, but we need to have her on a lot more. She's smarter than all of us.
Don't encourage that.
She's clearly smarter than all of us. She throws around toxic masculinity a little too much for my liking. But
listen, I've had so many conversations about this with her in real life, so believe you me.
Look, I mean, clearly, she is a much needed voice on this show because we're all starting to sound the same, in my opinion.
Well, maybe.
You just made the point that I've been making for 5 years as if it was your own point.
Well,
dude.
you know.
That is what I mean. Like things like that. And so having a different voice on the show would be quite lovely indeed, in my opinion. Anyway.
And you know how you do that, everybody? Email us at heromoviepodcast@gmail.com. It's that easy.
That easy.
It's easy. Even a Krista could do it. I'm going to get a lot of crap for that.
Jerk. You're going to be hearing about that.
I will, and you know what? I don't care. So, let's get down to it. But we're not going to get down to it just yet because we have one more real important part of this program. It's the one part that everyone agrees is the best way to start your day, and that's finding out how this movie connects to one Sylvester Stallone.
Hey, Adam. I have a prepared statement.
Ooh.
So before I get into that prepared statement, however, very difficult finding a Stallone connection this week.
Every now and then we give you a little bit of a challenge.
Well, it's a weird thing where it's surprising. There's people who have worked a lot in this movie and they've never worked with one Sylvester Stallone.
Odd.
That is not an excuse, however.
Good.
Stan Lee is credited as an executive producer on Dark Phoenix, which makes me wonder if movies will continue to credit him as a producer so the Stan Lee estate will continue to cash checks the same way that Michael Jackson and Elvis are still making money years after they've left the 616. Stan Lee was also an executive producer on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, as well as being credited as Watcher informant in the actual movie itself. Now, if you get into Stan Lee's history, there's a few things that are problematic, to say the least, but I'd rather focus on the cool stuff. Like in 1968, he publicly took a stand against racism and bigotry after getting some terrible letters from readers about some of the new Marvel characters. That's pretty awesome. Or the fact that he was worried that blind people would be offended by Daredevil. That's also awesome. But the coolest Stan Lee story comes from Ken Luperi at POW Entertainment. I'm sorry, Kim, if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong. Though Stan turned his editor-in-chief duties over to another Timely employee while he was in the service of World War II, Timely would mail letters to Stan at the Army base where he was stationed that detailed the stories they were looking for. Stan normally received the assignments on Friday and then, like an insane person would, would work over the weekend so we could mail them back to the publisher to meet the deadlines. But one Friday, something went wrong. Stan didn't get his weekly letter from Timely. But the next day, Stan walked past the mailroom, looked inside, saw his mailbox wasn't empty. In fact, it held a letter from Timely Comics. So he asks a few people to open the mailroom. They said no. And Stan took it upon himself to get his letter by breaking open the mailroom and hiding the evidence once he got his letter.
Wow.
He does, in fact, do this. He gets his letter, puts everything back to one, and gets caught anyway. The commander, who couldn't stand Stan, told him that he would be court-martialed for mail robbery. Now, luckily for Stan, a colonel he worked with who happened to like him came to the rescue and saved the day. Stan gets the story sent off to Timely, and he avoided the court-martial. Now, I have no idea how real this story is because, come on, it's Stan Lee. You never know whether or not this is true or not.
I promise you it happened.
But it is a pretty great story. And if my retelling it helps build the legend of Stan Lee, then I'm more than happy to do it. I like the idea of Stan Lee in World War II being bored enough that he keeps writing. I like the thought that his best idea was breaking into an army mailroom. And I like the fact that Stan Lee was a lot like Beetle Bailey in the 40s. So there's your Stallone connection this week, HMPers. It's Stan Lee. Thank you. I'm Sean Koufax. Thank you.
Yeah, he got himself a little thank you mention there at the end of the credits and everything, and I'm sure he was just if he were alive today, to be like, excuse me, can you just take that off? That's no good. I don't want anything to do with this movie. So let's get down to it, everybody. Here at Hero Movie Podcast, we have our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like to know what that consists of, head on down to facebook.com/Hero Movie Podcast. It's right there at the top of the screen. And while you're there, check out a picture of Bruce with a goat. Right? Couldn't hurt.
Bruce got a goat. Do 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 do.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that song either until you. I was just like, oh, I didn't know what this is, and I looked it up on the internet, and it was just like, oh yeah, that'll get stuck in your head.
Oh yeah, and it's such an ear bomb, and on top of it, whenever you bring it up around someone who has a small child, immediately that parent becomes your worst enemy.
Why would you do that?
Why did you do that? Why did you do that?
Oh, and the kids are in the video. They're just adorable. It makes it even worse. They're just like, oh, and they're cute. Oh, come on. Why are you doing this? It's good stuff. All right. So as far as Dark Phoenix goes with me, I think most people can tell the tenor of what we thought about this by how the show has kind of gone here. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is a Stephanie Brown for me, man. It couldn't be a Jason Todd because it's not so bad that it's just awful. There's enough in it to kind of give it a something, and that's just got to be a Stephanie Brown, which is in this case actually worse than a Jason Todd. Sean?
The exact same thing you just said. It's a Stephanie Brown. It is not terrible. It is not great. It is just there. It is something where I had trouble remembering what happened in the movie, and I saw it yesterday.
Because nothing happens.
Because nothing happens. I do think that the train sequence is something worth watching once everything comes to video and you can see certain scenes in this movie. I think seeing the train sequence would be pretty cool again.
Yeah.
But that is the only reason to see this movie.
Counting all the bullets.
It is such a bummer that 2 of the 3 people who made this franchise great again don't want to be in this movie. And that's a bummer. And so it is a Stephanie Brown for me.
Oh, very good. All right, everybody. That wraps up this week. Next week, guess what? We're headed back into the theater again. Bruce will be back on board, and we couldn't have we couldn't be happier that he'd be back because we really you need that sort of, I don't know, what can we call it? Guy that loves blobitude? Is that a statement? I don't know.
Sure.
So we'll be doing that. When next week we cover Men in Black International. We covered the first Men in Black on HMP a good while back. So if you want to search through the archives for that, go ahead and do that. But we got half the team from Thor Ragnarok coming out and doing a Men in Black thing, man. Yeah, a little Liam Neeson into that. It's gonna be fun. So we'll be checking out Men in Black International.
Is it though?
I don't know. I hope it's good.
Does it look fun to you?
Maybe. I'm hoping.
It doesn't look so fun to me.
Listen, man, I'm hoping, okay? I
am one of the very few people who like the third one.
I don't even know that I've seen the third one, actually. Think about
once they go back to the 60s, it's pretty great. But that is a conversation for next week.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll be talking about that in the meantime. Sean, anything to plug or anything that you want to any parting thoughts?
Yeah, go to Preacher Podcasts and see some of our stuff. I'm not on that show yet, but I will be.
He's gonna be.
Please check that out. And the fourth season is coming up here real quick. It doesn't feel like, when is it coming? August?
August, yeah.
It doesn't feel like August is close, but it is very close.
A lot closer than you'd expect, for sure.
It is a month and a half away.
Oof. And of course, the Film Find. The Film Find's back. I'll have a couple of mini episodes this week because nothing really came out outside of X-Men that was really that I've had time to cover or anything. And this week at work's been a little bit busier than normal, so you're going to get a lot of little mini episodes throughout the week. So check out the Film Find for that. I'm glad I'm back and doing that show. Makes me feel good about myself. Makes me feel like I'm accomplishing something for a change. So we'll do that. All right, everybody. Join us next week with a returning Bruce Leslie when we cover Men in Black International. For Sean Koufax, I'm Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.